Energy Central webcast entitled SSP Accelerate, Affordable, Straightforward Path to Utility Network Migration. Our keynote speaker today is Mike Goggin, Senior Product Manager, SSP. I was interested to learn that his career started in the drafting department of a utility using radiograph ink pens and a Leroy guide to help update maps. Mike, we'd love to hear more. Welcome to the event. Over to you. You have the floor.
Thanks, PJ. I appreciate it. Hi, everyone. I'm here today to introduce a new offering from SSP Innovations called SSP Accelerate. As PJ alluded to, it's an affordable, straightforward path to the utility network for small and medium utilities. Before we get started, I was going to tell you a little bit about myself, give you a little bit of my background. I've been in the industry for 32 years, and when I mean the industry, mapping the infrastructure of utilities. I started my career at Commonwealth Edison in Chicago, and yes, PJ is correct. I actually did use ink pens, real ink pens, and inked up on vellums and cloth maps, if you can still believe that. In the early 90s, we still had cloth maps at Commonwealth Edison. Then I went over and I spent some time working on the Esri Utilities team before moving over to consulting in around 2013. And today I'm a senior product manager here at SSP Innovations, and my primary focus is the utility network services strategy and several products. So I kind of want to start for the reason that we're kind of here today, really the topic of our conversation. And there is a reality and there is a challenge. The reality is that ArcMap and Geometric Network will be retired. Now, according to the Esri website, that's going to be somewhere around March of 2026. However, I have heard that date could be as late as 2028. Now, if we take that stretch date of 2028, that is still from today, that's only about 4 years to move yourselves over to the utility network, which is the challenge, moving your systems over to the utility network. Now, I say it's a challenge because we've had a lot of discussions over time. We've had discussions with utilities at conferences. We've had them on our implementation projects, some of our utility network planning projects, as well as just one-on-one conversations. That's why I'm using the word challenge, because people also have concerns. 3 of the top concerns that we hear is that it's expensive to migrate to the utility network. The utility network is difficult to understand, and therefore you're really not quite sure where to start. There's also been some misconceptions and myths. I hear a lot that the utility network is unproven. And I can tell you from my experience that just is not a true statement. SSP has done some of the largest utility network implementations in the country. These utilities are in production, and that means that the utility network is ready and it is mature. Now, I will say that it is software, so software matures more over time. And I can say that I was thoroughly impressed with the recent release of ArcGIS Pro 3.3 and ArcGIS Enterprise 11.3. In addition to that, the Utility Network version 7, there were some incredible gains in that release. So I'm confident to say that Utility Network is a proven technology for utilities right now. Another one is no mid-sized utility has adopted it. I highly encourage you, if you feel this way, or if you haven't, received confirmation on that, to reach out to your Esri representative. They will be glad to share the utilities that actually have moved over to the utility network. I know that that came up at last year's IMGIS conference, and my friends and colleagues over at Esri were more than happy to share, utility, contact names for other utilities to reach out to. So I definitely encourage you to do that. The utility network is not for small and mid-sized utilities. Again, Esri created the utility network for all utilities, not just large utilities. Now, it's going to be different, and there's change involved in that. As some people even say, it's too or over complex. And I think that that's just because you haven't had a lot of time on it quite yet. Once you get to understand it, you'll see that it is perfect for small and mid-sized utilities as well. Esri will support ArcMap forever. I love this because I've heard it before when I was working for Esri. My take on this is that, Esri has gone a great distance to develop the utility network for reasons that are outside of just wanting to change. They needed a new technology. And I believe that the dates that are posted, whether it's 2026 or it's 2028, I think that Esri is going to encourage everyone to move there. And, I don't believe that they will move those dates and support ArcMap and geometric network forever. This last one here is interesting because it's something that I heard more than one time, and that's UN data cannot be used in MillSoft. So MillSoft is just a piece of technology that sits downstream and or upstream in some cases of a GIS, and it involves an integration. Integrations usually involve transformation of data. I think that's pretty typical for most integrations because the idea is to transform the data into a consumable look and feel and conform to how that receiving technology is going to be able to leverage it. So MillSoft can absolutely leverage UN data along with other larger OMSs and ADMSs or gas hydraulic modeling systems. We're seeing this and have seen it in implementations that we have done. So MillSoft is no exception to the rule here. Then the last thing I wanted to cover, because again, it was more questions that we have received, is can I use the trace network? I think that you'll find if you do a little bit of research, you'll see that the trace network is not really defined or designed for an electric or gas utility. Esri created it several years ago, and they created it for a very specific reason, around streams and waterways, other, systems that needed some kind of network. But the trace network doesn't have the kind of capabilities that are required to run an electric and gas utility. Like I said, there's a lot of great information out there on that, and I encourage you to read it. So there's lots of challenges, lots of concerns, right? Some myths, misconceptions. But what if we took a moment here and considered some possibilities? Cost was a big, and duration, complexity was all part of your concerns. What if there was a lower and more achievable to your budget's way of migrating to the utility network? What if it took just a fraction of the time to accomplish utility network implementation? And this one's big. What if you didn't have to learn all the aspects of the utility network to get started? That's the, where do I get started question, right? There's a lot there. So having something to get over that would be helpful. What if you had easier to use tools to manage your utility data? And then back to that, where do I start? What if you just had a head start? And that gets us into the topics that I want to cover today in this discussion. I'm going to touch on the value of the utility network. I'm going to look at two approaches to get to the utility network. And then we're going to start to dig into the SSP Accelerate elements. We're also going to look at the benefits of SSP Accelerate and then see if SSP Accelerate is right for you. Now, conversations that I have coming out of the consulting world usually start with the value of the UN. So that's where I'm going to start today. So let's take a look at the technology. What I have here is a side-by-side comparison. Again, it's not fully complete, but I want to drive a point here. What I want you to pull away from the geometric network side is that the technology that geometric network was built on is 30 years old. It's also a desktop database, or also known as client-server architecture, which means that you're really kind of stuck in an ArcMap world to manage and maintain your network infrastructure. At the end of the day, it's just not robust enough for the future utility needs. So if we move over to the utility network side, we see that Esri took special care in creating a utility network based on current technology patterns. A pattern such as services-based architecture over the client server, which then enables things like device agnostic or network anywhere, which also provides the ability to move away from ArcMap if you so desire. And then there's the coincident versus non-coincident connectivity. So as a refresher here, coincident connectivity is where your points and your lines are within a buffer distance, and that buffer distance defines if they can be connected or not. So with utility network, Esri introduced the non-coincident connectivity. This is where your points and your lines, your points and your points, your lines and your lines, they don't have to be with any specific buffer zone to be connected. And they enabled that through a technology called associations. There are no third-party vendor required to manage a utility network to now. Now, that doesn't mean you won't prefer to use a partner solution like maybe SSP productivity to help alleviate or speed up or optimize or simplify your editing needs and requirements. There's also a robust network model. Now, this is a lot more granular than what we have seen in the past, and it's basically enabled by some of the other technology components as part of the utility network, such as the coincident and non-coincident connectivity, or another term called containment. And then lastly, it's a framework for analytics. Specifically, it's a framework for network analytics, right? You start to see, again, enabled by some of the other technologies, a more robust model, coincident, non-coincident, associations, containment, and now with the addition of trace configurations, which is really a framework for a more sophisticated trace, you now have the ability to leverage that for analytics. So let's move over to what is driving the utility business, right? So this is not about the technology. This is really the things that are in front of utilities today. Now, I'm going to stick in an electric framework because that's what I'm familiar with. So on the right-hand side of the screen, we have what I call three pillars. These are the three pillars that are on the tip of the mind of the executives at most organizations. You have the energy transition, which is the move from fossil fuel to renewable energy. You have resiliency, which is sort of like reliability, but it has to be pressed further based on new weather patterns, the fact that we're seeing 100-year storms maybe every 2 to 5 years. There's extra need there. And then there's electrification, which is really a movement of energy sources from wherever they were, natural gas or propane, into an electric, right? So as an example, like your appliances, you may move a gas stove to electric. You may move your furnace. You may move your water heater from one energy source to the other. Now, what's interesting about these three pillars is that when they converge, it is the most interesting and the most impactful to an organization. An example of that is trying to move from fossil into renewables. the challenges, right there, of renewables, maybe storage or when it's generated versus when it's needed. And then the electrification side of that, right, where your load demands are going way up. So you start that balance, and then you bring in that resiliency of, weather and climate changes and stuff, and it really becomes a challenge for an organization to really manage. Now, the bullets on the left-hand side are some of the other things that are kind of categorized within these three pillars. There's new and revised regulations, as well as policies. There's goals, like decarbonization goals, not just at the utility level, but on the utility consumer side of it. There's that forecasted load demand from electrification, trying to meet that demand. And then there's the new energy resources, right? The DERs, the distributed energy resources, such as residential solar panels or independent power producers, right? So through FERC 2222, these IPPs have an easier way to access your grid as a new energy resource. Then you have the infrastructure needs that are going to be required to serve electrification and the load demand. And then you have something that's been around as long as I have been, and probably a lot longer than I have been around, and that's the aging infrastructure, which they used to do a grading system, and I'm not quite sure it's ever moved from a D. And then I mentioned the new weather patterns, right? The unpredictability, so you have to be prepared for more. At the end of the day, what the utility is looking for is more data, cleaner data, data in a place that can be easily pulled from so that you don't have so many disparate systems that are holding data that are needed for these heavy analytics that are going to help solve the problems within those three pillars. So how does the utility network help serve the business? Well, it starts with data quality. You're going to have a cleansing process of your data in your GIS when you move to the utility network. The geometric network is a lot more lenient. The utility network, not so much. You won't solve all your data quality issues. You'll still have to have a good governance plan and strategy, but the UN is a great place to start making your data a lot more quality. And then, as I mentioned earlier, you have this more granular ability to model your system, your GIS, to get that system, your digital systems, more in line with what is actually in the field. Now, when you do that, you open up the opportunity to consolidate network and asset information from your other disparate systems. Maybe you have your underground in a CAD map, or you have your gas regulator stations in a CAD map. You have representations in your GIS of maybe a dot on the map, but then you have the other information that makes up that regulator station somewhere else. When you start to bring all of this stuff together in a consolidation and you build out your system more like it is built in the field, you start to create that environment for better integration. So you have better data quality, you have more data, you have starting to create one source of the truth, which then makes your integrations easier. When I say easier, it's, when you have data in so many different places, the integrations become difficult, as such as an ADMS or a power engineering systems. So bringing things together is going to improve your integration and your ability to move data from place to place. Then you have the opportunity to explore moving those workflows off the desktop. Remember, I mentioned that earlier, is that with this services-based architecture, we can now explore things on the web or in mobile that we couldn't and didn't have the opportunity to do before. And then you have this advanced network tracing, which I also alluded to earlier. Again, this is from anywhere, meaning that you can have analysis capabilities in a mobile device or in a web space for non-GIS users. Ultimately, what you're looking for is to make quicker decisions, and you want to make those decisions where the decisions need to be made. I like the example of a gas outage, and you have that usually that's managed from the field. So you have field personnel out there, and what's the first thing you try to do? Well, you need to understand the, how to shut down the gas, and then who's impacted by it. The shutdown and relight orders. If you can do that isolation trace from the field, you can generate a CSV file, which you can then use in Excel to manage the shutdown and relights, or you can pass that off to a different system that will manage the shutdown and relight. But ultimately, the decision was made in the field by someone that's in the field standing in front of the issue. And then lastly, there is this option for additional business enablers. If you have a more granular model, you start consolidating your network asset information, you have the opportunity to expand, like for example, your inspection process and workflows, whether they are managed from GIS or with GIS solutions or not. Your assets are in one place, which makes that an opportunity to explore. And then the geo-enabled non-GIS apps is something that we don't really talk about a lot right now. I think we're just not there yet. But I wanted to plant the seed that says you can have this non-GIS app. If I just built my own application, the web service or the services architecture just doesn't have data. It also has capability. So for example, if I have built this application and I need to know the first upstream protected device of a particular transformer, I can make that ask of the GIS through that service. I can do a trace and I can bring that back the result, which may be identifying what fuse, as an example, is protecting that transformer. So these are things that all enable the business and are very specific to utility network. So that's it with the value of the utility network. So let's look at the migration to the utility network, right? The way I see it, there's been two mindsets in one approach. The first mindset is re-envision. This is during your utility network migration, you are re-envisioning your GIS. This is where you peel back the onion of everything you do, your whole GIS platform, framework, how you serve your customers, your editing workflows. I mean, it could be everything. You really take a look at all of it and you re-envision it. And when you deploy the utility network, you're also deploying a brand new GIS workflow system platform. And then there's the just get there. That's where you may be constrained for some reason, whether it's budgets and resources, or maybe you're just happy with the way your GIS is right now from a workflow perspective. So it gives you the opportunity to get to the utility network, and then you can start re-envisioning your GIS as you get more knowledge on what the utility network capabilities are, as well as Esri's solutions and partner solutions get more robust. Both of these mindsets are not right and they're not wrong. It's just what is better for you. However, what we have seen is that regardless of which mindset you have, we have taken one traditional implementation approach. It usually starts with an Esri Foundation package, and then there is a series and a bunch of workshops to review. There's a lot of education there because maybe as a client, you don't know all the ins and outs. So before you can make good decisions on what your new system is going to look like, you need to understand it a little bit more. At the end of the day, there's a lot of workshops, a lot of consulting hours involved, which usually result in lots of configurations. And then there's the support or the development of supporting materials. Anyways, basically you're starting from the beginning, and that is very expensive and it is very time consuming. So what SSP has done is we've created a new implementation approach, and this is SSP Accelerate. With SSP Accelerate, you start with the Accelerate package. We add your required fields, the things that drive your business, into the new package. We add your data, we migrate your data. You get tools to optimize and automate the work and the data flow, and everything is pre-configured. You are starting 3/4 of the way done, which means that the expense to you is much lower and it is much faster to get to the utility network. You have that head start that I was mentioning earlier in a slide. So let's start to take a look at the elements of SSP Accelerate. So by definition, it's a product and services offering that bundles consulting services, a data assessment, the pre-configured utility network, and SSP productivity for network data management, all in a focused delivery package. So how do we do this? How were we able to do it? Well, we have hundreds of thousands of hours of UN implementation experience. Again, I alluded to the fact that we have deployed a utility network at some of the largest utilities in the country. We have learned a lot over that time frame. We also have decades of technical GIS, technical ESRI experience, as well as industry experience. There are many people in the consulting roles and in the implementation roles and in the product management roles like myself that have come from the utility business. Additionally, we have been doing research and development on the utility network since 2016. Now, one thing I didn't mention is that utility network was released in 2018. That means we were doing research and development 2 years before it was even released. And we were wanting to learn about the utility network. What has changed? What's the technology look like? How is it going to impact our customers? What could we expect? And we also shared a lot of that information as well. So moving down into more of the elements in more detail. This is the education and de-risking components of SSP Accelerate. It starts with consulting services. What we want to do is be very collaborative and sit down with our clients and explore the utility network and the SSP Accelerate solution. What we want you to start is to learn what you need to learn, kind of start learning the vocabulary, the methods behind the development of the utility network, and then also what the SSP Accelerate solution looks like. What does the data model look like? What are the associations? What are the automations that we have included, the symbology, the labeling, etc. Ultimately, what we want you to understand is how your work will change. By sitting down and walking through and really educating you on what the SSP Accelerate solution looks like, you will get a better idea of what your day is going to look like right after the implementation. That way you can get yourself prepared, you can get yourself educated, and you will be ready to go. It's also an expectation alignment. We want to make sure that the client and SSP are on the same page with everything. It's also an opportunity if something needs to change that we can flush that out during that process. And then there's the data assessment. What we're looking for are the anomalies that will cause data loss or contribute to subnetwork builds. We've done a lot of data assessments. We have tools that are defined very specifically as to the data situations that we run into that will cause those problems. What we want to do is we want to draw all those out. We want to de-risk it for the client, and we want to de-risk it for the migration itself. Out of that, we create a remediation report that we share, and we also talk through so that the client knows exactly what it is in their data that will cause the problems, and if something needs to be remediated. We also talk about things that we'll be able to remediate through the data migration itself. Or if you choose not to remediate, what is the impact to you once you go live on the utility network? All those things are very important. And again, it's continued expectation alignment. So the pre-configured portions of SSP Accelerate. We went with a less is more focused electric data model. So the components that we have built in our model are very specific to what the utility network needs to run. From a gas perspective, we are absolutely going with UPDM. It's a kind of an industry standard, and there was no reason to change that. So from an electric side, less is more approach, we are also ready for your required attributes, right? These are the attributes that are required to run your business. And then the utility network is basically configured around the data model. It's that way for all implementations. We added the right amount of automation to it, right? This is the editing automation where if I make an edit to something, you can have something automatically happen, such as a calculation of a field, or maybe it's some kind of validation. So we went with the right amount of automation to support the management of the actual assets themselves. And then lastly, we have a configured ArcGIS Pro map that includes the symbology, the labeling, the editing templates, all as part of the package that support, the UN configuration as well as the data model itself. So how do we implement this? Well, we start with a prescribed architecture. And what that means is that we don't have workshops to talk about the architecture. We have done all of that homework based on all of our experience and the knowledge of our technical teams. So we have some matrix, and we can prescribe what architecture is right for your organization based on your size, based on your number of editors, which will also include, the number of servers as well as the server sizing, the components of the hardware that you'll need to procure. It includes the installation and configuration of all the Esri software as well as the SSP software. We add the source attributes to your model, which includes domains. Those are the business required attributes that I spoke of. We do all the data mapping between your source system and the target system, and then we do all of the migration. We do system testing of everything, and then we also support user acceptance testing. And then we train the editors on how to use the solution. Then ultimately, we deploy the solution, and then we provide some post-deployment support for the solution. I'm going to switch gears here for just a moment and briefly talk about the network and data management product, SSP Productivity, which is included with SSP Accelerate. The premise behind our product is it simplifies the editing experience, it optimizes the editing process, and automates the workflow and repeatable tasks. So how do we simplify the workflow for the user, the end user, is we come at it from a workflow management perspective. This takes all of the mundane things like managing versions, where your edits are going to go out of your hands, basically, and use an assignment-based workflow where an assignment is created, your work is done within the assignment, and then it's using status, the data is moved through the system itself. Every user has an assignment queue. You have supervisors that can assign tasks or assignments and also have a view overall of all the assignments that are coming in and are getting completed. So you can also do things like run reports to kind of get a handle on all of your editing input that's coming in or what's going out. It also handles, if you have a data governance structure that your editors aren't going to do your posting, then you can actually hand off an assignment to a quality control person. They have the assignment from there, then they have the ability to look at it, use the quality control tools, and then set it to be posted to the system. Now, from an optimization of the editing experience, really what we're trying to do is reduce the complexity for the user. If you have done editing within core Esri, so that the solutions that Esri provides, then you'll understand that we want to, reduce the number of button clicks that a user is required. We also want to add visual tools. So we are a nice enhancement to ArcGIS Pro, but we also do have some tools that core does not provide. So some construction tools to make your editing easier, again, with fewer button clicks, and then visuals, like when you get into associations or you get into this concept of non-spatial objects. We also provide those as visuals so a user can actually see those on the map. And the workflow engine ultimately drives the automation, like I had mentioned earlier. So a user, when they're done with their edits, they will set the status of the assignment to post, as an example. And then what happens is the automation takes over from there. So your job is, pushed into a posting queue where we run a validation against your edits. This is in addition to the validation you've done in the version. If there are any inconsistencies, we push that assignment and status back to the user's queue for any rework that's required. Also for conflicts that should occur as well. But the job isn't done just when you migrate or post your data into default. With the utility network, you have some added steps that you are required to do. So the automation takes care of those steps for you. So we will post the data into default. We will then validate the default version because there are dirty areas that are created in default. Then we will also update the subnetworks, right? Whether it's a gas pressure system or whether it's feeders or circuits on the electric side. This is to make sure that things like feeder ID, as an example, get propagated or moved to the right places within the subnetwork or circuit. And you're not done there yet. So once you get done doing your cleanup of default, if you have integrations, as an example, or you want to push your circuits out to another system, you have to keep track of those manually if you don't have any automation there. But we do provide a change detection capabilities, which basically tracks the changes to the subnetworks based on a definition. And then it keeps those, and then it hands it off to another task, which then exports your subnetworks to a location where you want to be, where you want to store those, where somebody else can pick them up. Ultimately, what we want to do is we want to use compute time or computer time versus people time. So if you're an editor, going backwards a little bit, your job is done once you hit the status of posting that assignment. And then the system takes over from there, right? We're closing the data flow gaps in your system. You also have scheduling jobs capabilities. And then, of course, you have a job history, where you can go back, reflect, see kind of what happened to a job or when some jobs were run or when they weren't run. So that's SSP productivity. Let's switch back to SSP Accelerate. So what I want to do is say what's included within the base offering, but I want to explain the base offering. So we do have a base offering. This is what is included in it. And this base offering is a flat fee for everything that is in this list, right? So you have your data assessment, your project readiness, which is your consulting services, all the pre-configuration work that we have done, including the one pre-configured map, the implementation and configuration of Esri and SSP products, the data migration and all the data modeling that gets done as part of the source attributes, the testing, all the training, and then deployment and the hypercare support. And again, the key here is that the base offering is a flat fee. It's only fair to emphasize what's not included in the base offering flat fee. So changes to the pre-configured utility network, changes to the pre-configured map, or the pre-configured productivity implementation. We're not going to do data remediation outside of what we can do with our data migration tool. And ultimately, we can't, and I don't think anybody can really guarantee 100% built subnetworks. It's very dependent on the source data itself, but you will have an understanding through that data assessment up front what to expect. No customizations, no integrations, and if you have any portal configurations, maps or apps or field maps, we won't be redoing those as well. Again, that's the base offering for a flat fee. Now I'm going to caveat all this to say this. This doesn't mean we can't or we won't make changes to the base offering. It just means that the flat fee is what we accounted for. So we can do changes, and those would just be scoped as the base offering as the foundation of the ultimate work plan. And if you're wondering what your responsibilities would be in an SSP Accelerate implementation, pretty standard stuff, except there's a lot less of it. So a project coordinator or a project manager, this is for obvious reasons for your, for the client side to coordinate the different things that are required or needed. A subject matter expert, somebody that can work with the SSP team. If we have any questions, we help with the data mapping, the client side testing, etc. Now, the subject matter expert and the PM or coordinator could be the same person. It really is up to you, and that's probably going to be dependent on the size of your organization. Also, 2 requirements or 2 environments per the prescribed architecture. That's what we're including in the base offering. It doesn't matter what you call them. You can call them development, QA, test, production. It doesn't really matter. But what we will do is install and implement into 2 environments. And from a data perspective, we're going to need several cuts of the source data, several milestones within the project because we do several runs at the data migration itself. And then if there is any remediation of the at-risk data that was identified during the data assessment, you'll need to clean that up as well. If you choose to, you can choose not to and just move over to the utility network and then do your cleanup over there. So the benefits, what are the benefits of SSP Accelerate? Well, it provides everything you need to migrate to the utility network right now in the base offering. The base offering is a much lower cost to moving to the utility network. It also reduces the time frame to get there considerably. A lot of the work, and why is that? Because a lot of the work that normally winds up in a UN implementation, we have done most of that up front with our pre-configured solution. It also removes the requirement of having to be a UN expert before you migrate. This gives you the opportunity to move into the new technology and then start your journey of learning, right? And I know that the feedback we've gotten is that the utility network seems complex. It's no more than when you first dove into the geometric network and ArcMap and just managing utility infrastructure with an Esri framework. It's just a matter of time. You have spent 10, 20, 30 years perhaps in the same system. This system is new. You don't have to know everything when you move to the utility network, and that's what SSP Accelerate provides you. And then ultimately, because your investment, if you go with the base offering or something similar to that, your total cost of ownership and your return on investment are much smaller, right? Or they're larger on the gain side, and they're lesser on the investment side. So it's just smart business to go in that direction. So is SSP Accelerate the right solution for you? Well, if you're an electric and gas utility, you are a small to mid-sized utility, you're an Esri customer, you're using the geometric network, you're using core Esri or ArcFM to manage that network, and you're looking for an approach that meets your needs and budget, then SSP Accelerate is definitely a solution for you. And that's my thoughts for the day on SSP Accelerate. And I think we're going to open it up to any questions we have right now. Keith, do we have any questions that we'd like to answer?
Thanks so much, Mike. Yes, we do. All right, let's get started here. First question, you mentioned Accelerate does not include integrations. What if I have them? How do I do this?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Like I had mentioned, SSP Accelerate is 2 things. It is a base offering that you can implement for the flat fee, or it is a starting point for where the base offering is your foundation, and then you can add something to it like an integration or a customization, something of that nature. And what we do is we scope that in. Now, we have taken into consideration several common pattern integrations, but those would just be added to the base offering as far as the cost goes.
All right, this next one is a combo here. What are the criteria for small and mid-size electric utilities? And also, what if my utility is larger than 100,000 meters?
Okay, good question. So right now, we have launched SSP Accelerate for what we call Tier 3, which is 30,000 meters to 100,000 meters. Now, we are, and that, again, that is a flat fee for that group, for the base offering. We are working right now on Tier 2, which is 100,000 meters to 1,000,000 meters, and we will have more information and more pricing to come on that in the third quarter, later in the third quarter.
All right, thanks, Mike. Next up, I think you did answer a question right there, which was, did you say it was a flat fee? I think you just guessed it. Next up, after Accelerate is implemented, can we make changes to it?
Yes, and that's actually the strategy that we believe is an effective strategy. Again, because one of the benefits is not having to know a lot about the utility network technology to get started. It provides the ability to get you to the utility network. You've gained some knowledge through that process, but then your journey begins to understand. So when you wanted to make changes to the utility network, you will be able to make those. I think another thing I want to make completely clear here is that SSP Accelerate is not a black box, right? So once it is implemented, the data model, the UN configurations, the symbology, the labels, the editing templates, everything that's there, you have complete control to change. So I'll give you an end note here. So say you're going through the consulting portion of the implementation, and you come across a feature that you're not happy with the name of it, and you want to change the name. Well, actually changing the name in most occasions has a big downstream impact to the utility network configurations. The business rules to support that is a major example of that. There's lots of them, and the tools that we as implementers have, they don't make that super easy and fast to do. So what I would recommend at that point would be, everything in your system is changing 100%. Everything, your data model, you're going to ArcMap to ArcPro, your tools are all different. It's a 100% change. Could you possibly just try to keep the name consistent, to keep the cost down, maybe go with the base offering, and then once you deploy, if nobody is really liking the name of that feature, you can change it, and then you can change all of the downstream, and it's a cost that you have on your side that is just internal cost to manage it and maintain your system. These are the things that you really want to think about, because what we're trying to create is that affordable migration to the utility network.
All right, thanks, Mike. There's a lot of questions coming in. Okay, next up, how do you ensure the data in the pre-configured solution is compatible with my ADMS?
There's that's a great question, and I don't know if I'm going to be able to answer it as elegantly as maybe colleagues of mine. I mentioned earlier that most integrations are transformations, which means that your source data is going to transform into a consumable form of the integrated system. And that's what we're seeing right now. So we have, in our implementations that we have done, I mentioned earlier, all of them had ADMS systems. And all of those ADMS systems are leveraging UN data. And I can tell you that one project that I was on, First Energy, it was a complete change to the ADMS, where the data model on the GIS side was a complete change from the foundation package. So it was a matter of just tooling the integration to make sure that the ADMS was getting the data in the format that it needed. And again, that's just an exercise your GIS data model, I believe, and again, I don't want to talk over my skis here, but it can be anything. It's just the key is the integration and the transformation of that data into the usable format.
All right, thanks, Mike. Next up, how can I find out more about the model and configurations?
Yeah, another good question, because I'm sure everyone is very curious about that. They want to know what model we came up with based on all of our knowledge of new systems and old systems. And that would be just to reach out to us. And, we can certainly set up some time to where we can go through and show you what the solution looks like, and then start to give you an idea of, what the data model looks like. And again, the data model, if you haven't seen it in the utility network, might be a little shocking to you. So where you have maybe 50, 60 feature classes in your geometric network, basically you're going to have like 4 or 5 in your utility network. Now everything is subtyped, so it'll all come out in the wash at the end of the day, but when you first look at it, it's really kind of a shock.
All right, thanks. Next up, what if the ARC map ties in with ArcFM? Will the migration consider this workflow, or those UN have functionality of ArcFM, such as cost estimates of materials for workplace?
I'm not sure I understand that question.
Well, I would say if someone entered that in, if you could re-ask it, we will get it up here. Moving on, advanced network tracing is a huge leap, but the question is, when will it officially be made available to offline purposes with poor connectivity as an issue?
That's a great question, right? So the reason the functionality of the Esri products hasn't been immediate upon the release of utility network is because the utility network team is one team, but then you have your other teams that are involved, whether it's the field maps team, it's the what other mobile tools there are, the dashboards team, the experience builder team, and that functionality had to be made available within those frameworks. And they are making great headways as far as core product goes. And I know that offline tracing is in the roadmap. If it hasn't been already released for field maps, I could be wrong on that, but that's for the core technology. From a partner solution perspective, that's going to be up to us partners that have mobile solutions that will be able to take that tracing offline. So it's one of those things that maturity of software over time that is getting that we're closing the gap. Esri's closing the gap really every time they release something new. So I can't imagine it's not that far long off before it'll be available offline, if it's not already.
Thank you. All right, next up, is this cloud-based or can it be configured on-prem?
On-prem. We are looking at hosted and managed options for this solution down the road, but that's part of our roadmap, and it's not a near term. It's not a third, fourth quarter 2024 thing. However, most product companies drive a lot of their stuff based on user feedback. So if we get a bunch of user feedback that says, yes, managed services in that area, then we might move that up.
All right. Do you have an estimated time frame that a typical base offering may take from kickoff to support?
3 months.
All right. Next up, does UPDM Accelerate also include linear referencing and all the regulatory tables? You ensure the data in the pre-configured solution is compatible with my ADMS?
Yeah, that is a great solution, and that's where my expertise falls off. We'll take that question. Let's take that question, Keith, and if we can find out who asked it, then we can respond directly. My knee-jerk reaction says yes, but I want to verify that before we confirm it.
Next up, would you say the Electric Utility Network Foundation Data Dictionary is the attempt to help with a data model standard for utilities to adopt, similar to the UPDM? Maybe the same answer you had last time.
Well, yeah, I mean, data model is important, and Esri has their foundation model, which is trying to cover all the basis for all the utilities, and it's fantastic, by the way. That solutions team did a great job putting it together. Things will usually in the electric space. I don't know if there's a matching data model out there anywhere, but our model for SSP Accelerate is really a culmination of all those years of experience, people coming from geometric network, the easeability or the familiarity of it all. But it's, I wouldn't call it industry best practice, because that says a lot. I mean, we're SSP, we're not the industry, but it is based on some pretty significant knowledge within the industry that's been doing this for a long time.
Okay, thank you. Okay, hi, Mike. With field maps, it seems that the utility network trace results have been limited to 500 records. This reduces the trace from anywhere capabilities. My question is, how does SSP plan to work around this for a client?
Working around core limitations is going to be pretty tough. What I can say is how I would try to handle it is really try to understand the workflow, what you were trying to accomplish. 500 results seems extreme for a mobile trace to return. I'm not sure what you're after, but work with the trace configurations to narrow down what it is you're looking for more specifically. And trace configuration offers that capability. They've done a great job, and really the hard part is trying to understand the trace configuration logic behind it. Also, the use of categories. If I can throw out a little bit of a hint there, which is a UN configuration component, it'll really, which you can leverage within the trace configurations, will help dramatically reduce the number of returned results, unless that's what you're looking after. I don't know what you're looking for.
All right, I'm going to combine some questions here. I think they all match. Do you cover water and sewage utilities, or is it just gas and electric? And the same was asked for fiber optic networks.
Yeah, right now we're just focused on electric and gas, but we are kicking around the thought and the idea, but we haven't there yet. Of course, it's a common, right? It's a default question. Should we move it to more commodities or just stick with the electric and gas? And from a telecommunications perspective, that's an interesting question. If you don't know, SSP Innovations has a full telecommunications arm and solution, and we're not sure how to cover the needs of utilities, right? Because they're such vast. If you're offering fiber to the home, that's a complex situation. But if you're just tracking the fiber that you're using for your own automation, your SCADA systems and stuff, it's a lot easier, right? It's a lot easier of a feature to track. So something we haven't really bridged yet, but we're thinking about it. And again, client customer feedback would change that potentially.
All right, thank you. Next up, will we need ArcFM for UN, or can we just work with Esri tools for electrics?
Third-party tools are not required anymore with utility network. Esri gives you all of what you need to manage a commodity utility. You may want to use a third party, and again, SSP Productivity is our solution that again simplifies and optimizes the editing experience, and then also fills those data automation gaps. Part of that is understanding a little bit more how to manage the network and the utility in the UN space. So no, you don't need ArcFM to manage a commodity network on Esri framework anymore.
Thank you, Mike. This may be our last question here. We have more, but this may be the last one. Does SSP Accelerate consider when migrating from ArcMap that uses ArcFM that is used to manage cost estimates for work plan?
Okay, that sounds like it was the same question worded a little bit differently. So I'm not sure what you're getting at there. If you're thinking design purposes, if you have attributes that are within your current source system that are being leveraged from something, so that you're using them to run your business, you can most certainly bring those source attributes over to the Accelerate solution. What I don't know is how you're calculating or what tools you're using to calculate those cost estimates. So that would be something that, you know, we would need to look at to figure that out, but your data can come over for sure.
All right, thanks, Mike. PJ, I think we have hit our time. We have more, but this is the end of our time frame.
Thanks, Keith. And thanks, Mike. That was a great presentation. For our audience, we hope you've enjoyed today's discussion. Thank you for attending. This does conclude today's presentation.